Hi, did you know vampires can potentially be called one of the most versatile characters in cinema history? Fascinating, right? We have seen them in genres like horror, comedy, romance, teen romantic drama, and even Indian superhero movie. Though its first appearance ever made was in a silent movie called Nosferatu the Symphony of Horrors, which was made back in 1922. History of vampires go way back in the folklores. Even in India, ever heard the stories of Vikram Vetal? Well done. You have witnessed some of the earliest depiction of Indian vampires. Now, let me tell you beforehand. The Western depiction of vampires is somewhat a combination of traits of both Vetal and Pisach. Basically, the idea of vampires varies place to place all over the world. So, a tall, handsome guy with a white skin and a black coat covering his entire body. I'm Batman! Vampire. But coming back to the point, this was more of a Dracula thing than what most cultures envisioned vampires to be. We'll talk more of this in a moment. Firstly, let's see what a vampire is. A vampire is a partially undead creature that survives on blood, preferably from a human. They have super strength, super speed, and red eyes. Basically a Superman in Batman suit. Sorry, I have to stop now. They have red eyes, sharp teeth that helps them pierce skin, sharp nails that they use as weapons. They have breath that they use as chloroform. Literally, they can make you sleep with their breath. Also, in some beliefs, they have powers like hypnosis and they have a ever-pumping heart. Basically, they are immortals. So, how did they come to existence? Traditionally, the very origin of the vampires is unknown. However, the only process known for the growth in their population is if a vampire exchanges blood with a human. And no, bats and rats don't make you vampires. Traditionally, their weaknesses are garlic, crosses, holy water. Also, they really have to return to the coffins during the day. They theoretically should not be able to attack you until you haven't invited them somehow. Now, they can usually be killed, re-killed with stakes through heart, burning them or beheading them. And as much as it may surprise you, traditionally vampires were not killed by sunlight. In fact, they weren't even much bothered by sunlight until in 1897 novel Dracula, written by Bram Stoker, that showed them somewhat weaker in sunlight. Then it was later in the movie Nosferatu that brought in the concept of killing them with sunlight. Also, the modern vampire perception that we have comes most from this novel. The idea of fangs, bats, fear of sunlight, black coat, all these were Bram Stoker's idea. And majorly, the romantic and seductive behavior of vampires originated from the European depiction in the book The Vampire, written by John Polidori in 1819. So I was introduced to the character of vampires with this dark fantasy adventure movie called The Vampire's Assistant, which was not the best but a decent vampire movie. However, it did increase my curiosity towards the character. This movie was particularly based on the novel of the same name that had a concept of two groups. First, the vampires who just sucked the blood of humans without actually killing them, and the second were the vampires that actually killed humans. However, this classification only existed in that universe. Then later, I came across Nosferatu. Did you know the famous movie Nosferatu, the Symphony of Horrors, made in 1922, was actually an illegal adaptation of Bram Stoker's fantasy novel Dracula? With the altered ending, the makers did not obtain permission before making the movie. Also, they altered the name from Count Dracula to Count Orlok and changed a few other details to avoid copyright infringements, but were later sued for the same. They were then ordered to destroy all the negatives of the film, but the movie was already distributed abroad. So the movie went on to become a classic hit, and later by the years, many remakes were made time to time with better VFX for both the movies Dracula and Nosferatu. In fact, last year in 2024, Nosferatu was remade, and it also managed to gain high critical acclaims. You know what's the basic difference between Orlok and Dracula is? They represented Orlok to be more like a rat, hunchbacked, bald monster, while Dracula was this charismatic, seductive and pale-skinned vampire in a black cloak. Further, movies like Interview with the Vampire released, starring top stars like Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt as vampires, that was sort of inspired from both Dracula and Orlok. This movie showed killing a vampire was only possible with fire and sunlight, and other rules around garlic and stake through heart were assumed baseless. And this is how a movie conveniently adapts or abandons the general vampire rules. And because vampire is just shared mythical being, there is no fixed set of rules that all vampires should have to follow. Similarly, the recent release LOKAH Chapter 1, that is in my opinion one of the best superhero movies in India at the moment, that effortlessly presented us with a very fresh depiction of vampires. The lead character Chandra, who is bit by a bat in a particular cave, gains power of a vampire. In movie, it is explained as a virus that the bat carried that turned her into a vampire. And not all human body can handle the virus. The movie conveniently abandons the coffin rule, as the character keeps moving from place to place for centuries, and always returning to the same coffin would not be very convincing for the viewers. Like every other vampire, Chandra has super strength, super speed, heightened senses, and a high temptation for blood. Also, if you notice, in other vampire movies, they are generally shown in dark and less vibrant lighting to highlight their pale skin and make the character stand out on screen. But in Loka, they beautifully integrate vibrant lighting and abandon the general pale skin idea, logically not to show her more sinister but rather more reliable, as more normal. However, in the movie, when she needs blood, they smoothly integrate the pale skin in order to show her sickness. And this makes more sense when you think about it. For a character to live for years unnoticed among humans, they have to blend in, and of course, having a pale skin will draw attention. Also, about the sunlight effect. In the movie, it doesn't instantly burns her, but burns gradually, more like Dracula, that could go out in sun but used to get very weak under the sun. However, one complaint I have about the movie is, in order to become a vampire, one has to die first. That they showed with Chandra, yet somehow not in the case of the policeman. Also, one thing I really liked about the movie was the romantic angle between the lead characters. Naslin, being an immature boy, falls in love with the character of Kalyani, but Kalyani, being a vampire who has lived on for multiple centuries, hesitates bonding with new people. The movie successfully integrates modern vibes with the upbeat background score and vibrant lighting. It maintains the city vibes throughout the movie. One thing about the fighting sequences, especially the final battle in the movie, which I found odd, was in the movie where a super being is fighting regular humans, somehow it doesn't feel very supernatural. Even though their efforts are evident, the choppy cuts and transitions somehow makes the fight scene feel a little blocky at moments. But such mistakes can definitely be ignored for the results they have produced with such budget. Even though it is a superhero origin movie, they do not spend a lot of time explaining the origin. Rather, the movie seems expanding the universe at a comfortable rate. Several characters, such as that of Dulquer Salman and Tovino Thomas, were used just enough to establish a universe but not to overuse them. So overall, the movie effortlessly blends in the mythic creature vampire into a superhero image without actually changing much from its characteristics, and that has me quite interested about the characters and the story that we will see in the universe. So that's all for today, guys. If you liked the video, consider giving it a thumbs up and leave a comment telling me what you think should be discussed on this channel. Please press the subscribe button to help me grow this channel and shoot more interesting content your way.